Controller Steve first to give us an ending report of the year 2016. He's not here at the present time. And in the interest of expediency, let's go. Mr. Norton, you're on. Right, hold on. Mr. Guarneri, what do you have to tell us? He's walking over now?
From where?
Eric, I guess you're not on.
Age before beauty.
Well, he's done.
That's right.
Down Old Country Road. Yeah. From his house. He's got his Fitbit. Gotta get his steps in. Okay, Clyde, you're supposed to make sure people are done.
Everybody is in big.
Oh, your outfit was Thanksgiving. The hat was No, it was nice of yourself. Maybe you'll last. Yes. I was going to say, what is it you can
Yeah, that's what.
So she waited for somebody else to come in. And she read the door behind her.
In the house.
Yeah, I don't know.
I guess we're ready to begin. So, Marigold, is anybody else going to join you?
Yes,
Okay.
Lisa.
Wow. That's the big man? Okay.
Ready?
I
guess it's whenever you're ready,
We're
George.
ready, at least a half an hour. Let's go, let's go. Let's go, it's your turn. We didn't want to go out of order here. Okay, suppose. State your name for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is George Maragos, Nassau County Controller, and to my right is our Director of Accounting, Lisa Chikouris.
Okay.
And, I have an opening statement with regards to the county financial state. The county ended 2016 with a 27.1 million gap surplus in the primary operating funds. On a NIFA statutory basis, the county ended with a negative 83.1 million, which excludes other financing sources used to pay for operating expenditures. The gap surplus was achieved by using approximately 40 million in borrowing to pay for operating expenditures. Excess borrowing of 66 million was deposited into non-primary funds, including 49.3 million into the litigation fund, 13.1 million into the employee benefit accrued liability fund, and 3.6 million into the new bond indebtedness reserve fund. Between the increase in the cash reserves outside the primary funds and the 27 million gap surplus, the county total fund balance on a gap basis increased to by 60 million to 170 million as of year-end 2016. The long-term debt of the county and its blended component units ended 2016 at 3.6 billion, a decrease of 143 million or 4.1% over 2009. Other long-term liabilities for property tax refunds, deferred pension costs, and the utility litigation decreased by approximately 21 million to 850 million at year-end 2016. Our 2017 budgetary projections are as follows. In our 2017 mid-year financial projections, we indicated the county is trending to end 2017 with a 57.6 million deficit, both on a GAAP basis and in the statutory basis mandated by NIFA. The administration, however, is expected to find revenues and expense opportunities to reduce the projected deficit, but may be hard-pressed to achieve a GAAP balance by year-end 2017. The projected fund balances are expected to decline to 67.8 million, down from 170 million at 2016, assuming the gap closing opportunities do not materialize. The noteworthy items affecting the budgetary projections are 10 million at risk in income and expense revenue due to litigation, 60 million in lower bond proceeds for property tax refunds, of about 12.5 million in payroll expense, primarily due to higher termination pay for an increased number of police officers retiring in 2017. The total long-term debt for the county and its blended component units are projected to decrease by 102 million to approximately 3.5 billion after pay down of 244 million in maturing debt. Although the county financials appear to have improved both on a GAAP and NIFA basis, and the long-term debt of the county decreased by over 100 million compared to 2009, the county's fiscal challenges in 2017 are masked by the use of non-primary funds set aside in prior years to pay approximately 44 million in litigation expense. The fiscal challenges will increase in 2018 due to the anticipated structural cost increases in labor, healthcare, and other mandated costs, but without the cushion from the large fund balance and borrowing to pay for operating expenses. Thank you. I'm happy to take your questions.
Legislator Nicolau.
Controller Maravos, do you know what the current fund balance is?
The total of all fund balances is about 170 million.
So is that as of the close of 2016?
16.
Okay. As of 2016. So, but do we know what the number is right now? Or would we know what the number is right now?
Well, some of that has already been drawn down. I believe about $43 million to pay some litigation expenses.
Okay.
And it's expected to be further drawn down.
Just want to go over, you mentioned a number of different budgetary methods of evaluation. You mentioned budgetary accounting, you mentioned GAAP, and you mentioned, I guess, NIFA statutory. What's the difference? What are the differences between these different budgetary accounting methods?
Well, we stopped using the controller's office as recommended, and we stopped reporting on a budgetary basis. It was terribly confusing that we had budgetary, we had GAAP, and NIFA statutory basis that we previously were calling a NIFA presentation basis. So NIFA objected to that and asked us to change it to statutory basis, which we did.
I understand that, but what's the difference? what's the result of you using that? What differences are there between using a budgetary basis as opposed to NIFA and/or NIFA gap?
Well, GAAP is generally accounting principles that we all have to use, and that takes into account certain accrued expenses at the end of the year that have to be accounted for that are not included on a budgetary basis. And of course, the NIFA presentation then excludes all financing sources that are normally included both on a budgetary and on a GAAP basis.
All right, so then you've adopted NIFA's statutory basis, NIFA gap, because to avoid the confusion?
No, we just changed the name because the format, the formula remained the same as previously.
And in terms of a budgetary basis, how do we end 2016? In terms of surplus deficit?
Yeah. It would be just a little higher than GAAP. 17 or 16?
16.
16. 41.
41.
Plus 41 versus GAAP 27.
And what's the projection for 2017 on a budgetary basis?
Like I said, it's meaningless and it's confusing, and we're not going to be reporting on a budgetary basis.
That's nice, but I'm just asking a question entitled some information.
Well, it's usually that the differential depending on the amount of accrued expenses, anywhere from about 3 million to 10 million, 11 million more higher on a budgetary basis.
Do you have a projection on a budgetary basis for the end of 2017?
And that's, by the way, in the report, that in the mid-year report is 55.3 million budgetary.
It's going to be a $55.3 million projected deficit on a budgetary basis at the end of 2017. Is that accurate?
Yes, 57, yes.
So the projection on a budgetary basis is almost the same as NIFA gap basis for the end of 2017. NIFA gap is 57 million.
Right, yes. Because we're not, the amount of borrowing or other financial sources have been reduced substantially.
But I'm asking you, if you don't accept NIFA's accounting basis for going forward for this year and use the budgetary basis that was used in the past, what is the projection for the end of 2017?
I just mentioned 55.3 million budgetary. That's in the report in Exhibit 1, Table 1.
And that's using NIFA gap?
No, it's a difference. There's 3 methods,
Right.
and each one has to be treated differently. Budgetary, GAAP, and NIFA statutory.
Right.
And each has their own rules.
So on the budgetary, you're projecting a $55 million deficit this year?
That is correct.
Okay, well,
And on a GAAP basis, 57.
okay. In terms of budgetary basis, so GAAP, what do the other municipalities in New York State use?
They use GAAP.
They use GAAP. Do they use GAAP or do they use the statutory basis that's mandated by NIFA?
No, they don't use the statutory. They use GAAP.
They use
And
GAAP.
we've had this discussion with NIFA, yes.
Okay. All right, so are you aware of any other municipality in the state that's using the budgetary, the accounting method that's mandated by NIFA? Do you know any other municipality?
I'm not aware, not to my knowledge.
You know what the New York State uses?
GAAP.
So they're not using the standard that NIFA is imposing upon us. Is that-
NIFA is not a standard. That's why we called it statutory. They opine, the legislature, or, that we need to exclude from GAAP the other financing sources.
So it's not even a standard, it's just simply a mandate on the part of NIFA.
That's
how I
correct.
go about doing things.
That's correct.
I'm sorry, can I just I'm sorry.
Legislator Mackenzie.
Just to clarify something. You said earlier that NIFA has asked you to refer to it as NIFA statutory. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And there is actually no written statute that requires that other than NIFA saying so. Is that fair to say?
Under the NIFA Act, they ordered us to do so back in 2011 or
Okay, but that was an order of NIFA. That's not dictated in the statute itself. That was NIFA who chose to do that, not the statute, the enabling statute itself.
The statute allows, NIFA to set rules, and they set the rule by which they wanted us to report, our accounting, and they've done that.
Okay, and that is-
And for, if you recall, all prior years, we were asked to call it the NIFA presentation because it was a unique NIFA presentation methodology.
Yes, and that's what I'm just...
In the latest meeting we've had, they've asked us to change it to call it statutory.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just trying to clarify that it wasn't actually in the enabling statute that we're required to do that. It's a NIFA dictate
That's
that is
correct.
asked to do
That's
that.
right.
And as Legislator Nicolello said earlier, no other municipality that you're aware of in the state does it that way. Correct? I'm sorry. As I said earlier, as we were saying earlier, as Legislator Nicolello pointed out, you're not aware of any other municipality in the state that's required to do this, right?
Yes, that's what I said.
And then, and just to clarify, I'm not disagreeing with you, I just wanted it clear that it's not the enabling statute that requires this, it's a dictate of NIFA that requires this and that which changed the rule.
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay, and can I just ask you something? It wasn't in your verbal presentation, but on page 17 of your report, the third bullet point down, it states that reflecting sales tax and other taxes. In the pilot agreement, other taxes increased as a result of higher payment limit taxes due to transfer.
What report are you
Sorry.
referring to?
Page 17,
Are you referring to the mid-year report?
comprehensive annual report.
Okay.
That third, yeah. The third bullet point there regarding sales tax increases and a payment in lieu of taxes. In part, it states that a payment in lieu of taxes, other taxes increased due to a payment in lieu of taxes due to a transfer of Long Island Power Authority parcels from property tax levy in order to adhere to a state cap on these parcels at 2% and a decrease in levy from property taxes at 41 million. And it's not clear to me what was the net effect just on that issue itself, on the transfer of the LIPA properties.
Yeah. I'll ask Lisa to clarify.
The administration had indicated that due to the fact that the LIPA properties could not be assessed at greater than a 2% increase annually, they were removed from the tax roll and placed and considered LIPA pilots. So the offset in the property tax decrease is just offset by the increase in the LIPA pilots.
Okay.
It's just a reclassification of those properties.
Yeah, I understand that, but did the reclassification end up with a net decrease in the amount of money collected by the county?
No, I believe that it was a wash.
Okay. Thank you.
Carolina, do you have any questions? Legislator Bynum?
Legislator Bynum go first.
Okay, Legislator Bynum.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Good afternoon.
Hmm?
So I want to go back to, in your oral presentation, you mentioned the fund balance as of 2016, and you stated that it was at 170 million, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you said that did not include the drawdown of 43
No,
million?
that was at the end of 2016.
So, but you mentioned $43 million. Was the 170 after the 43
No,
million?
I was asked if there, where does the fund stand approximately now?
And then you mentioned $43 million.
That-
Could you clarify that $43 million in terms of what you understand it to be earmarked for?
Yeah.
I'm not sure of the exact number at the moment of how much has been drawn down so far, but there's been money put aside for judgments and claims in one of our funds, the litigation fund. So some of that money has already been spent on settlements of claims through the year. We anticipate that, according to the 2017 mid-year report, we anticipate that the majority, if not all of that, will be spent, whatever we had at the end of the year in that fund. So I'm not sure off the top of my head how much has been spent so far this year, but I think it's at least in excess of 30 million.
Okay, so it's I know that we were supposed to maintain at least 4% of the annual budget in the rainy day general fund account.
It's a little complicated to, we talk about fund balance a lot of times. What the controller has been trying to go to is a gap, talk about gap fund balance, because we are required to report our financial statements in accordance with GAAP. And in accordance with GAAP, fund balance is not all spendable. You can't spend all that fund balance. It has to be reserved for certain things. So while we may say that, on a budgetary basis we have X number of dollars, the reality is not all of that money is really spendable. And when you look at the CAFR, for example, you can actually see in one of the exhibits, it talks about what's restricted. So, what's not spendable, what money has been set aside, and what the real, availability is for spending. So I personally like to talk about the CAFR, since that really is what we're supposed to be reporting, and it explains things a little bit better than budgetary fund balances and such.
Okay, so then based on the CAFR, that was the $170 million.
Agreed, but if you break that 170 down, a significant portion of that amount is set aside for things. For example,
They're restricted funds.
Restricted or non-spendable. For example, the county prepays their pension. We prepay it to get a cut, to get a discount on it. So that money is considered non-spendable. Even though we may still have that cash available, we can't spend that cash because we need it.
So I know some time ago, NYFA included in a report in their mid-year review of the county financials that some of the credit reporting entities have made an issue of the fund balance, stating that it was unfavorable for the county to spend that fund balance because it would impact the cash on hand. What is the position of the comptroller on that?
Those are different issues. We're mixing a lot of issues in one. I think we need to clarify where the fund balance stood at the end of 2016.
Which you did.
Which was 170 million.
Okay.
Okay. We projected for 2017, assuming a certain projected deficit under current spending and revenue trends, and the drawdown of the other funds, that we would end with about $67 or $70 million in total fund balance. That's, I think, it's the simplest way and the best way to look at it. Now, if we want to talk about policies, then let's talk about policies. But it's important that we understand, what the numbers are with regard.
Well, I understood what the numbers are.
No, but it was apparently very confusing because we were mixing projections and spending with actual fund balance at various time periods. And I think
well,
it's very important that
I was using a number that you mentioned during your oral presentation.
Right.
I wasn't using any other numbers because there are other numbers, and that can be confusing. So I just figured, in order not to, have an already complex issue even more confusing, I decided to use your number. So my question was then, the first question I had, just for clarity, was when you mentioned $170 million, was that $170 million at the close of 2016, and then you mentioned $43 million was spent, and that was spent during 2000, or earmarked to be spent?
Yes.
And then we went into CAFR and.
Right,
and-
okay.
Okay,
Yes, because, and that's why I wanted to be very clear that at the end of 2016, our fund balances, our total fund balances stood at $170 million. Okay, that I hope is clear.
okay, it is clear.
170 at the end of 2016.
And then we went into what was spendable and.
No, forget what we're spending. I think what's important to realize is that under the projections that we have, both NIFA.
It was important for your report, but for me to be able to have some questions answered, I'm going to go past what you said in your oral presentation, and I need to ask you some questions.
I'm happy to take your
Okay.
question, but, and I'm trying to clarify, that you're asking numbers that are out of context to what you need to know.
Well, okay, well, I'm not sure. Okay, so let me try my question again.
Mhm.
And we'll skip past the $43 million and there's what's spendable and all of that. NIFA has stated in a report that the credit reporting agencies deem it to be unfavorable for this county to be spending the fund balance in rapidly because it reduces the amount of money that we have on hand. And I asked specifically, what was the comptroller's take on that issue? I'm not sure how that
Well, even
confuses any
before,
of the issues.
it's true, even before NIFA said that, we have been repeatedly, every year that I've been a controller, urging not to draw down on fund balance to fund operating expenses. And additionally, not to use borrowing to also fund operating expenditures. And that has been a consistent theme and statement that I've been making every year as the Nassau County Controller.
Okay, so the tax certiorari money, the $33 million that's supposed to be earmarked coming out of the fund balance, did your report take any of that into consideration?
We've taken
For
everything.
the projection?
We've taken everything into
For
consideration.
2017, so what do you show us at the end of 2017, now closing out with the fund balance based on
We're
projection?
saying that our fund balances at the end of 2017, giving spending patterns and intended uses of the various fund balances, we will end with less than 70 million in total fund balances at the end of 2017.
And your understanding, based on the county charter, states that we would be then under the minimum requirement?
That is correct, and why I'm alerting you to it.
Okay. I'm actually concerned about it as well, to the extent that I have drawn up some legislation to require the county to, utilize the fund balance, because I think that it's not proper for us to be sitting on taxpayers' funding as a rainy day fund while we're continuing to raise fees. But I do think that we should spend it, with a plan. It should be a responsible plan put in place over a multi-year process that allows for the county to then be able to utilize the money, but not to just rate it in 1 year. I think I think that would be irresponsible for the county to do such a thing. So I was just trying to get your opinion, and I'm not sure how we got confused on some other points. So in terms of the, and I know that VSIP and that's going to come up later, but that wasn't taken into consideration when you did your mid-year plan either, was it?
Which part, I'm sorry?
The VSIP, the voluntary separation?
No, that was not.
Have you at some point since then been able to get any numbers in terms of
We have no
applications?
numbers, but what we hear, and we are concerned that it may exacerbate the year-end results.
Being able to, so there's been no opportunity for you to speak to anyone in OMB or in any other?
We have no numbers that we
No
can
numbers at all.
project.
Okay. I have a couple of other questions, but I think I may turn it over now to the minority leader, and then if the presiding officer will allow, I'll jump back in. Thank you.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. I think Legislator Bynum started to ask questions in the area that I was going to focus on, which is the VSIP program, which I obviously probably indicated that we don't have numbers, but what you're hearing is starting to be alarming. I mean, the greater question, obviously, because it seems like there's a directive that in the past, these programs have been paid for through bond dollars, and now that it seems like they're going to be paid through with operating dollars, which I have no problem with. That being said, the legislature is getting ready to take action on this later today after our budget review meeting. And is it safe to say that you're saying on the record that the county has, or the controller's office has some serious concerns? And how would you recommend us moving forward, considering your concerns?
Well, I'd like to get us numbers, and I think you should ask for numbers and details before, we can draw any conclusions, as to both the short-term benefits and the long-term benefits, because it would appear that such programs have a short-term negative impact and a long-term beneficial impact.
Correct. And I envision that if I understand this correctly, after talking to some of our finance people, there is a potential for, Michelle, 18 million in potential savings for the out years.
Total we were grants and numbers, and they said
Potential 18 million for the out years, which could save the county a tremendous amount of money, but looking at 2017, it looks like obviously there's the potential of actually paying for the VSIP and then the termination costs that go with it. Would you concur that that's probably giving you more angst in regards to the 2017 short-term negative?
Yes, obviously, it's going to be difficult for the county to end in balance. Actually, the deficit may worsen as a result.
My next round of questions is tied into bonding. And I'm not asking you to weigh in why this legislature has not bonded. I think as our side, we feel very comfortable in our position of not bonding, and I'm not going to get into the reasoning why. I think everybody's pretty much understands why our reasoning is. But that being said, this legislature has not bonded for capital purposes, which in our minds has not incurred debt service for quite some time to the levels that we have in the past. Considering where your deficit projection numbers are, have you ever calculated the fact of the county not bonding at the same levels as in prior years and what contribution that has or what negative that has in regards to the operating funds and the operating deficit potentially set up for this year?
I prefer to look at it differently, because, and that's why I've been urging the legislature and the county administration to continuously avoid borrowing funds for operating expenditures.
I don't mean for operating expenditures. I'm talking bonding in general. I'm talking for capital expenditures. Obviously, there's a debt service that's associated with bonding for capital expenditures. And I'm not asking you to opine on whether or not bonding is correct or not correct, or our fight for an independent inspector general / public correction officer is correct or incorrect. I'm not asking you for that. But there is a financial impact by this legislature not going forward with bonding that creates a savings, in my mind, unless you correct me if I'm wrong, that creates a savings in debt service for this county. And I was wondering if you were able to quantify what that number has been, being that the legislature hasn't bonded to the levels that it has in years past, or at least the last 18 months to 22 years.
No, we have not. But let me say that's not our job to make determinations on the capital spending. That's
I'm not asking that.
That's usually a worthwhile investment that you're making for the long-term future of the county. With regards to the total debt, as we've pointed out, that has actually been reduced by about over $100 million since where it stood in 2009. So there's been significant progress made in that regard. And as I've stated in the past, the total debt, long-term debt that the county has, is not inordinate. It's not out of line. It's very manageable at approximately 1.2 of the total county revenues. And I put that previously in perspective, that normally when a family wants to buy a home, they go and borrow money and the bank will lend them 3 times, the annual income. And that's quite manageable. In the county's case, it's only about 1.2 times our annual income, which is, of course, very manageable.
No, and again, the worthiness of the programs that are in question has never been in doubt. We truly believe that all programs are worthy. That's not the issue. It's the oversight and the transparency in the process, which is, we truly believe is lacking. That being said, I would be interested if your office has the resources to do so. Obviously, when you factor in also the operating costs that have been capitalized in regards to the tax certiorari's in year past as well, I would like to see something from your office, and if you're able to put it together by the budget season that's coming up in the next couple of weeks as we start to get hearings, I would like to see some type of analysis that reflects the lower amounts of bonding that we have done over the last amount of years and the impact that it's having on the out years. Because I truly believe that it is having a tremendous impact, not just from the tax certiorari standpoint, but from the capital side as well. And right now, this legislature, I envision at some point will start to bond again for these programs at some point, probably when there's another county executive. But that being said, I think I just want to make sure that what we're looking at in a short-term perspective and how we look at it from a long-term perspective, that dynamic can very well change if this legislature starts to ramp up its bonding again, which, look, I'm no fan of, but I'm just saying.
We're happy to do that. We need to have a separate discussion to make some reasonable assumptions.
Well, I'll have my finance person reach out to your office and start to put stuff like that.
Fine.
But thank you.
Thank you.
Legislator Bynoe.
I'm done. I've concluded. Thank you.
Legislator McKenzie.
George, just a few follow-ups with you,
Sure.
and I'm just to re-emphasize that if you were to do an analysis of the lack of bonding for capital investment that's taking place, clearly that wouldn't account for the degradation of our infrastructure that's taking place as a result of not repairing it. Is that correct?
That would be correct, and I wouldn't advise it. As I mentioned a little earlier, capital investments are investments in the future of the county.
Correct. So when you did that analysis, it would strictly show numbers on a page. It wouldn't show all the roads in this county that people are driving on that aren't being repaired as a result of.
Well, I would not make that assumption that there would be zero capital bonding. We can look historically, and recommend kind of a more conservative to an optimistic scenario in terms of capital borrowing, and we'll make those projections accordingly. We will certainly not do an analysis that shows zero capital bundling. It will be completely unrealistic.
Okay, and then just to follow up on one item, you said that you have $12.5 million in termination pay as a risk. Right, I think that was in your oral presentation, if my notes are correct? As a risk in the budget? I'm going through my notes, so correct me if I'm wrong.
That's the overall payroll expense.
No, I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood. I thought you said that there was, in risk for the 2017 budget, you had 10 million on income expense, another item, and then 12.5 risk in payroll and termination pay.
That's correct, everything, right.
Okay, and you said the termination pay risk is as a result of your concern that there would be more retirements solely in the police department, or is this related to the VSIP also?
Mostly in the police department.
Okay, so it's not related at all to the VSIP, that 12.5 that you risk? Okay, thank you.
Legislator Nicolello.
Just, I wanted to touch on the if you do an analysis with respect to monies that were saved by not borrowing over the course of years, when you don't spend money on infrastructure, it tends to degrade, correct? It tends to get worse over time.
That's correct.
Right, so many times if you don't spend money on infrastructure, in fact, you're going to wind up spending more money later on because you've let it go too far.
That is correct.
All right, so if you do an analysis and it says that there's a certain number of savings because you didn't bond for this, that analysis does not take into account that you may actually be winding up spending more money later on because you failed to attend to your infrastructure.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Minority Leader?
I think we understand what Legislator McKenzie and Deputy President was saying. All I asked was in regards to debt service, what we're saving in the county. This legislature, the county executive will make a determination in terms of infrastructure and how the money should be spent. Obviously, if you have a dilapidated road or an infrastructure in regards to your sewage treatment plants and you're not spending the money on the upgrades, it could very well be more costly in the future. We don't know that because we don't hold enough hearings to determine that. So I don't know how anyone could give an opinion on what the infrastructure would cost. That being said, this legislature has bonded for roads. I don't know how we couldn't have bonded for roads when I see contracts that are before us in the Rules Committee that are coming up today that must be using bonded money to pay for the roads. So I don't want you to cloud the analysis. You got to do two different analyses, one for us and one for them, that's fine. But my question is more tied to the savings in debt service and how the lower amounts of bonding basically has attributed to that. That's what we're looking for. Now, has debt service gone down, or has it not grown by the same levels that it has in years past? By how much? And if we could quantify the factor of not bonding, does it contribute to that, or does it not contribute to that? Whatever your analysis determines. That's what we're looking for.
Okay. Again, I want to remind that I indicated that our long-term debt has been reduced by over $100 million. That stands at 3.5 versus where it stood at 3.6 approximately at the end of 2009. So our long-term debt has come down, has been reduced.
And that's, I'm sorry, and that's a result of not bonding? I'm assuming, not bonding?
No, you bond, but you also have to pay down as debt to service it, and as it matures.
I'm saying, you're saying that the long-term debt, and I see a number here, the long-term projected debt is down by $102 million. And so that decrease, what do you attribute that to?
Well, the amount of borrowing annually has been reduced, and the pay down has also increased. Yes.
But that's capital. Okay, that's what I'm saying. So in essence, in a way, your analysis, we just need to see of that 102, because obviously that's not all capital. That could be tax certiorari's as well. We would love to see what portion of that decrease is attributed to not bonding for capital at the same levels we have been doing prior to 2 years ago.
That'll be fine.
Thank you.
So you're not looking for projections, you're actually looking for a more detailed analysis of the historical impact. Okay.
I mean, if you're able, it'd be hard for you to project because you really don't know what the legislature is going to do.
No, that's why I was asking that we need to
You
agree
don't
on
know.
assumptions.
No.
But if we're looking at the historical analysis, then we'll do
The
that.
historical and how it projects towards what the debt service will be
Sure.
in the future.
Okay.
Correct. Thank you.
May?
Yes, one more question, Madam
Minority Leader.
In your opinion, and I know in the spirit to be fair, I might have given the impression I wasn't going to ask you this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. There's been a lot of discussion about independent inspector general as well as public corruption officer, not just in this body. It's been discussed in other levels of government as well. Have you done an analysis from your office? One, do you support it? But then two, have you done an analysis on your office of the potential it could save the county in terms of expenditures or making sure we get the best practices in to make sure that our RFP process, our screening process selects the best vendors, which could potentially save the county money as well?
I think that's a political question.
Political?
You got that right.
Why would you say it's political?
I think my political views on that subject are
Mr.
well
Mr. Controller, it's a policy question.
articulated.
It would be political if there were two parties in this county that supported, that didn't support it. Like, if it was just one side that wanted to do it and the other side didn't, then I would agree with you. But as far as I know, Supervisor Saladino in Oyster Bay is a Republican, and he supports it. Councilwoman Erin King Sweeney, as far as I know, is a Republican, and she supports it. Councilman Blakeman, also, as far as I know, is a Republican, he supports it. So I don't see this being as a political thing, I think this is a policy thing. And I would love to hear your opinion. I don't think they're political, and I beg to differ to the majority, but I think your opinion would be valid. I also believe going back to the second part of that question, even if you don't think if you think it's political to say how you believe whether or not it's necessary or not, do you believe there's a potential savings of having an oversight monitor watching over the procurement process in the county?
Well, since you brought up that subject, and I guess I'd like to give the courtesy of an answer. There continues to be, as in any bureaucracy, and waste and mismanagement. And to the extent, I think I've stated from a political perspective that I would favor an independent inspector general. I've also gone further than that and also recommended an independent procurement director, not only to investigate after the fact, but to prevent waste and before the contracting process or entering into contracts. I've also suggested term limits. I've also recommended banning all vendor contributions and public financing of elections, so that we have a government that truly represents the community. And we take every step possible, to reduce or eliminate waste and mismanagement.
Thank you.
No other questions of Mr. Maragos? I say thank you.
Thank you.
And now it's your turn, Deputy Kelvin, Secretary.
Thank you.
Finance. Eric Norton.
Thank you.